I want you to remember the first episode of Doctor Who you ever watched. Perhaps you were a child just beginning to get into TV and drama, or perhaps you were an adult at home on a Saturday night and just happened to stumble upon a magical blue box while surfing the channels. I want you to think about how that episode makes you feel now. Because sometimes a piece of media comes along and latches itself onto someone and shapes them. It becomes their childhood, their troubled teen years, or the one constant in their 20s. They may have grown up and changed, but the media is always there, offering a doorway into a nostalgia that can never be replaced. And I believe that feeling, that familiar comfort we feel when our childhood movie begins to play, is the closest we will ever get to time travel. Because sometimes stories can transport you, and that's exactly what this week's Doctor Who explores. This is a Doctor Who review, the story and the engine. I'm going to do this review slightly differently. I'm not going to break it down scene by scene, and instead I'm going to talk about it mainly as a whole, because this episode is different. It feels very unique, and although not all of it worked for me, I do love that it tries something new. One constant that has been evident through every episode so far is the performances, and again, they were all incredibly strong. Ncuti Gatwa has really owned the role this season. I was unsure about his Doctor last year, something just wasn't clicking for me, but this year it's slotted into place. I feel like they've found 15's flow, which has allowed me to enjoy every episode much more easily. Glinda as the companion again is great, although she is very sidelined this episode, which is a shame. Given that we didn't get a lot of her last week, it would have been nice to see more of her in this story. Though to be honest, I think that's more of an issue with only having 8 episodes a season. It does mean that if you want to explore a certain character in more depth, then others will be slightly sidelined. And I know it's unrealistic to want 13 episodes a year back, but this really did help when fleshing out companions and their home lives, and you can really feel the difference with the shorter seasons. The episode itself is a mixed bag for me. The story and the engine has a lot going on. It's crammed with ideas, and although I'd say most of them are great, 45 minutes just isn't enough time to explore them all in depth. I will say I loved the first half of the episode. I think they built the intrigue up incredibly well. The cold open was really fun. I loved the drawings that helped bring the stories to life, and we'll talk about them more in a bit. I loved how the Doctor spoke about feeling connected and accepted, and look, I am a very pale white man, so my voice really isn't the one to speak in depth about these moments or the themes I've raised throughout, but I thought they were really well written and an incredibly important thing to talk about in a tea time family show. Visually, the episode looked great. I found some of the directing a little bit odd, some scenes didn't flow as well as they could have, but the actual sets and the colours throughout just popped. You could really feel the heat and the energy in those market scenes, which was then juxtaposed by the quietness of the barber's street. My issue with the episode, however, comes when the plot starts ramping up. I just found that as the episode went on, the story and the engine became muddled, as if it didn't know what direction it wanted to go in. It felt very much like the writer had always had this idea for Doctor Who, so when coming in to write it, didn't know which ones to develop more and which ones to let go of. The actual concept, the stories people tell at the barbers having a cosmic power, is brilliant. I love that. But then more and more things get added. We think it's the god of stories at first, maybe linking to the Pantheon, but then it's not, but then the gods are still involved. The Doctor knows one of the characters but can't remember them, which then means the fugitive arrives for a cameo. There's just a lot that's going on, and honestly, at times I was kind of confused. And although this may be because I watched it as soon as I woke up, I still did find it harder to follow than I usually do. And yet, for an episode so full of ideas, I also felt like the pacing was incredibly slow at points. And I feel like this is because as each element was introduced, it killed the tension. There was no mystery to work out, everything was kind of just described to us. And the dialogue itself was great, you can tell the writer comes from a theatre background, but it was very exposition heavy. And what annoys me about this is that the episode actually had a visual concept to get out of this, but kind of abandoned it halfway through. The stories coming to life through the drawings were great, and I wish this stayed throughout. I think every story should have been shown in this art style, and I even think the clips at the end of previous Doctors should have been animated. This concept reminds me of the film Monster Calls, and if you haven't seen it, please do it, it's brilliant. But throughout that film, we're told fairy tales that appear on screen as watercolour-like paintings. It's really magical, and I think if this episode kept with the idea, it would have had the same effect. And we should probably talk about the Fugitive Doctor's cameo, and honestly, yeah, like, that's kind of how I feel about it. It's nice to see her again, I guess, but also doesn't really do much for me. I find it hard to get excited by a character whose only appearance for like the last 5 or 6 years has been like 2-second cameos. And Jo Martin is a great actor. I bet she would kill the role if they gave her something to do, but at the moment, I just don't get the appeal of the character. I just think it has more potential to be messy than be gripping, and I would love to be proved wrong, but I don't get it. I don't get it. I also wish we had a monster, and I know that makes me sound like a 10-year-old, but if you've watched my other videos about Doctor Who, you know I love a monster chase down the corridor, and although yes, this would have felt out of place in this episode, I do agree with that, I am longing for a monster this series to be on screen longer than 5 minutes. I think it's fair to say this is probably my least favourite episode of the series, but that's not saying I didn't like it. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't for me. And having a quick scroll through Doctor Who socials, I think this episode has been the one that's divided people. Some people loved it and were completely immersed in its story, while others like me were left a little cold. Next week, it's Eurovision in space, which 1, sounds like the most Doctor Who idea ever, and 2, better have a monster chase. If the Eurovision episode doesn't have a monster chase, then next week's review may be a bit of a rant. Eurovision in space screams monster chases. It's crying out for one, and so am I.